8 years since the U.S. invasion, and right now at the White House, the president, of course, is meeting there with his national security team for a third strategy session on what direction to take this worsening war. The president is scheduled to meet with his advisors for 3 hours today. Meanwhile, President Obama has received the official request from the Pentagon for up to 40,000 additional troops in Afghanistan. The president has not given a timetable for when he will make a decision on that request.
Formally, this should and is working its way up through the respective chains of command in the United States military and NATO. And that is the process it is undergoing right now.
Joining us now is Jon Soltz, an Iraq War veteran and chairman of VoteVets.org. And John, what is your group's position on the idea of adding more troops into Afghanistan, and explain it?
Well, I think we've taken a sort of a different position than that. We're really encouraging people to ask a lot of questions. My last piece on Huffington Post is really about this debate, and we really want to see from the White House where they're at. They've got the best information on this. There's strengths, there's advantages and disadvantages to putting more troops into Afghanistan. It can provide more security, but on the other side of that debate, you have the counterterrorism strategy will be less troops and focusing just on al-Qaeda, because there's real concerns whether or not the Afghan government is a true partner to build around. So we really want to see this hashed out, and we want to see some guidance from the White House.
John, in your estimation, how much of the problem in Afghanistan is related to the heavy focus that was put on Iraq?
Look, that's a real issue. I mean, you had 130,000 troops in Iraq for years. Remember, there was more casualties in Afghanistan this year than there was the first several years that we were there. So, that sort of cuts into that troop argument. But you have, basically half of your standing army was in and out of Iraq for the last 6 or 7 years. So the military is rather exhausted. So when you talk about sending troops to Afghanistan, that doesn't do a lot to help the op tempo. And I also think the transition of the al-Qaeda war, in a sense, from bin Laden to an ideology, was supercharged by the Iraq invasion. So it played a real detriment to the Afghan war, and I think that's rather accepted in the American public.
Hey, John, I want to ask you, our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Richard Engel, was here earlier, and he spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he's saying, really what so many are saying, let's not focus so much on the number of troops, but what is the mission here? What is the clear mission? What are your thoughts on the fact that it seems to be floating across the room what our goal is even anymore there?
I think this is the key point that the White House is hashing out. Do they want to go with a counterterrorism mission, which would be a smaller troop footprint that focuses just on al-Qaeda, or do they want to go to a counterinsurgency mission, which would be protecting the population? Like I said, there's advantages to both. And really, General McChrystal's, played some politics here with the administration. He, his 60 Minutes interview, the Washington Post piece by Bob Woodward, I don't think that's going to gain him ground with the White House here. I understand his counterinsurgency strategy, but without dealing with the Pakistani government, without dealing with Karzai's corruption as a fuel for the Afghan insurgency, and without dealing with the broken interagency process of our federal government, the counterinsurgency strategy would have a hard time working because of these other elements. So the actual debate about the troop levels is the least important debate. We should be looking at these larger issues, and really the White House needs not to be on weeks, but days on figuring out what strategy and what guidance they're going to give their commanders on the ground for a mission to execute.
Jon Soltz of VoteVets.org. John, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. And Tamara, John mentions one thing there at the end we haven't talked a lot about, and that is, what was Stanley McChrystal thinking? Did he think that by going on and giving these speeches and going on 60 Minutes, he would somehow be able to browbeat the president into giving him what he wants?
A great article was Eugene Robinson, Washington Post. He wrote basically the general needs to salute and shut up and listen to what the administration has to say. So that a lot of people are still talking about it, though.
Yep. Coming up.